Oh, nice.
Yeah, cool.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Keith Langdon. This is my classmate Mario Zarati. How is everyone doing? Today, we're going to do our first iteration of our podcast. This is our first time doing this, so hopefully it goes well. We're going to tell our academic journeys, and our main goal is to help people understand how we came to love learning. And then hopefully, by hearing our story, it can encourage more people to love learning as well, because we both did not always love learning. So we're going to start it off with Mario. Go ahead and start with your journey.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. I think it's funny to ask the audience how they're doing.
I was thinking
Expect,
about that.
yeah,
I was like,
expecting
that
a
makes no sense.
no, you're all good. Yeah, expecting a response back, but we're just sending that question out into the void, hoping there's listeners out there. But in any case, we're gonna dive into a bit of how I got to love learning. For me, a lot was happening at once when I was about 17 years old or so. Hopefully, that's the target age of our podcast listeners right now. Folks who are kind of having an identity crisis, transitioning between high school and college. Um, a lot of what was happening at once was things like I had depression over the loss of my sister. My sister died of leukemia when I was 17 years old. I was having internal debates over my religious beliefs, and that was just a big part of what I was going through. And I would also say being able to reconcile my love of my passions as like a teenager, things regarding my passion for cars, but how to make a career out of it. These are all questions I was wrestling with at the time. As I was wrestling with those questions, um, it was the case that I felt like going into the college sphere, I I didn't think that there would be space for me there. I didn't think that that was the sort of space that would address a lot of the problems that I was going through at that time. Um, so I think if there is any students out there that feel like you're having any sort of debate about whether college is worth it or not, or if there's a space in college for you, just know I was there myself. I'm now a PhD student, but it's the case that when I was originally like a 17-year-old, I was just trying to go day by day. I think that's the best way I could describe my experience. I didn't, it wasn't even the question of whether there was space for me in college, actually. It was probably more the case that I was worried about, just getting through the day, getting through the week, as so many people who I think struggle with depression uh, feel. I was, grieving my sister. Um, so, what finally, you know, shifted my journey along, I would say, as I was a bad student and I was struggling with these problems, I had a high school teacher who gave me a break, essentially. I was supposed to fail this AP, it was probably like an AP government class that I was like accidentally enrolled in. I wasn't a great student, so I shouldn't have been in an AP class, but I was accidentally in his one class, and I was completely flunking it, and I wasn't going to take the AP test at all or anything like that. So me flunking that class would have meant that I wouldn't have had enough credits to graduate high school. So I was on my way to continuation high school. But then this high school teacher gave me a break because he knew that my sister had died. In fact, he was the one who had gotten the phone call from the front office sending me over to get picked up early from high school to go to the hospital. So given that he understood my situation, he went on ahead and lent an olive branch out. He said, "Hey, I noticed you had a pretty bad winter, the winter break of my senior year of high school." He said, "But I hope you don't have a bad summer. I don't want you to flunk my class. So I'm gonna, give you a chance to do something special. What I want you to do is I want you to organize a TEDx talk at our high school. This is something that our department has been wanting to do for a while. And if you can organize something and, present a talk, that talk will give you an A in my class. You can completely pass my class without having done any of the particular work that you didn't do.
So it was like talking to other students, or what do you mean by TED?
Yeah, so it was literally like a legit TED talk. Like I had to reach out to the TED organization that stands for Technology, Education, and Development, right? And I went through this like online course that basically instructed me how to set up a TEDx event, X standing for the community. And I set up a TEDx talk at my high school. It took a lot of pulling people together, coordinating with like the theater program because we were going to use their auditorium, coordinating with several English teachers who just seemed to have a better act for how people were to construct and present a TED talk. And then later on, I had to give a TED talk myself at this very event that I set up in literally the last month of my senior year of high school. All was like all bets were being hedged right here on the last minute at the last minute. I did not prepare a TED talk right up to the point of giving it. The night before, I was like, shoot, I should really jot down some notes, because
Were you the only one speaking, or was other
there
speakers?
was 10 speakers,
No,
10 speakers,
like students, teachers.
all students, all students.
So you did all this by yourself? Just that's pretty
Yeah,
impressive.
well, it wasn't just me by myself. It was definitely like we had stagehands from like the theater. We had several teachers helping organize and identify students, like really, good students to give talks. And students gave talks on everything from public health to their love of film literature to, it's all available on YouTube still, actually, including my TED talk. Folks had to dress
We'll
nice.
check it out. So you've done this before.
I not really, because as you can see from my TEDx talk, I'm very sort of ashamed of it because, like I said, I was a 17-year-old listless student, and I thought, what should I talk about? So I started looking at talks that I looked up on YouTube, talks that like don't value school. How would I explain it? Talks that criticize school. And I found a lot of Sir Ken Robinson's talks on the TED YouTube page. And he was basically one of the most significant TED Talk people around in the early 2000s. Um, so I basically riffed off of that when I gave my TED Talk. I talked about how much I hated school. I talked about how much work it was to put this TEDx thing together. It was just basically, it wasn't like this. This is Conversation Street, right? But when I gave my TEDx talk, it was Rant Avenue. I was just ranting at an audience for like, it was supposed to be 10 minutes, but I think my talk ended up being like 12 minutes, which meant that I didn't even have time for questions and answers afterwards. They just, you know, shushed me off stage. When that high school teacher gave me a break, though, there's something about it that made me feel like, oh my God, like this guy just released the pressure valve a little bit for me. He didn't have to do that. He could have just flunked me, right? And I could have gone to continuation high school. But instead, I was able to graduate and walk with my designated class because of him.
Did you already have a relationship with that teacher?
Not really. That's the sort of crazy thing is I would sometimes ditch his class, never did any homework with him. They tried to get me to do some sort of intervention program with the assistant principal where he would touch base with a lot of like young males and he would basically have like a check in and check out with them. And when he got to me, I remember the assistant principal and there was also a counselor there too. They shared like they shared a little bit about their faith and how their faith was guiding them, their Christian faith. And again, circling back to my internal debate over religion, like I was not in that sort of headspace. I was not ready to be talking about religion in any sort of way. I felt, if anything, like, sort of angry at God or the cosmos or whatever you want to call it for having taken my sister, right? So I feel like that intervention that they tried to do with me with that check in and check out, I completely rejected it. And I never, after that first one, I never did it again. So I was really falling through the cracks, but it was that high school teacher who didn't even, I feel like he didn't even know too much about me. He didn't know my interests. He didn't know my aspirations. He never followed up with me after high school or anything like that. Like he just gave me a break because he knew like this guy just lost a sister. And that was it. It was just a completely humanistic moment. Um, and because of him, I got to graduate high school. It was the only class that I was on the fence about. Um, and so still listless, I graduated high school and the stakes got higher.
I'm still stuck on the whole TED Talk. Like a student just put together a whole TED Talk. It's pretty
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that that is kind of a significant point in the story because when I put that TEDx talk together, it was a moment that allowed me to demonstrate that I'm capable of something. Um, Having not done any of the homework that I was supposed to do during that year, it was very easy for me to feel like I wasn't a capable student. But when I pulled it off, it allowed for a bit of a pick me up. It was one reward within a series of bad feelings throughout that senior year of high school. Um, but even as big as a pick me up it was, it didn't send me over the edge and just fundamentally change my life for the better. Um, because I was still a listless teenager. I still had like a sort of, how would I say it? I was a rebel without a cause to, clutch at straws for some sort of stereotype of what my mentality was at that time.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check the video out. I only got one video of me on YouTube teaching English to first graders in China
Yeah,
that I have locked and no one will ever see.
yeah, yeah. We're gonna have to link it down in the comments below.
Not a chance.
Um, but right after I graduated high school, sure enough, I had like, God, there's so much that was happening back then. But believe it or not, I had a girlfriend, and I got my girlfriend pregnant. And when she found out she was pregnant, that was just a fundamentally, life altering
This
thing.
happened during your senior year, you found out?
No, this is the summer right after I graduated. So I very quickly, just around the month of July, I found out that she was pregnant. And once I found out she was pregnant, I mean, you know, my I came from a working class background, from immigrant parents, and my parents had this mentality that I really ought to have taken advantage of living in the neighborhood that I did and the school system that I attended. And they were basically very disappointed that I was throwing my future away because, I was becoming a father so young. So they kicked me out of the house. That was a very difficult moment in my life.
Where did you go?
What was that?
Where did you go?
Oh, so that's the thing is, so I went over to Hazel's, and instead of being appreciative that, I'm over here at my girlfriend's place and that we're gonna, be there, um, I was still in this listless attitude. I had zero appreciation for much in life. I had, I don't know, essentially no values. I think a part of me just had a real death wish that I was carrying with me everywhere. So instead of being all appreciative and gracious towards her parents, I essentially like got into arguments with them and yelled at them enough to the point that they kicked both of us out of the house. So thank God for Subaru station wagons, because that's where Hazel and I slept for a little bit until we could couch surf on our, at our friends' places. Eventually, um, we got up onto our feet because I had enough money that I had saved from working with my dad all throughout high school to be able to buy a truck, buy a generator and a water tank, and start working out of the back of that truck. I knew exactly what I would do for money because it was just a low, it was an easy job that I knew I could do, but it was a job that I knew could pay well enough to support Hazel and I until we get back onto our feet. And that was washing tractor trailers over at the warehouses all throughout the IE, but particularly in Ranch Cucamonga and Fontana and over in Rialto. would wash a lot of tractor trailers out of the back of my truck during those times. And I would do them all at night because, believe it or not, when you wash tractor trailers, if you do it during the day, first off, the tractors aren't there during the day, they're out on the road. And second off, if you put water on a trailer in the heat during the day, the water dries before you even have a chance to put some soap on there. So I would have to work throughout the night to do all of that.
So what time was this taking place?
It's taking place at about, I mean, usually about 7 p.m. till like 2 a.m. in the morning. I would work. And provided enough cash income to be able to support us to get our own place and just generally be able to attend all of her doctor's appointments until she, gave birth. It's a it's a pretty there's a lot of dips and dives and struggles in between, finding out she was pregnant and the point that she was secure enough to be able to have the baby. There's a lot that happened during those 9 months, but I'll spare you all of the details. In the meantime, I'd like to talk about our the real talks that Hazel and I would have during those 9 months about our future and what our future was going to look like. You see, Hazel was on track to be a very, very good student and go directly to a 4-year university, which she still did. She went to Cal State LA. Oh, the lights in this room turned off. These are the sort of technical difficulties that you get from a first-time podcast, people. When she talked about me in college, I was strongly resistant towards all of that. I thought to myself, college isn't for me. That's not really my thing. I think that now more than ever, I need to be in I need to be working, and then you can just do the school thing while you're taking care of our daughter. But instead of doing that, she really pushed me. She really motivated me to go to college because she said she was operating with the expectation that people who don't go to college aren't as better off in the long term. And she wanted us to stay together as a family, no matter what. And she wanted us to be a highly educated family that would be very stably secure, like financially secure. So she motivated me to go to college. So I went to the community college that I actually grew up near, called Chaffey College, and it was yeah, it was a great experience because the second I got there, my work was so difficult, staying up all throughout the night and washing those tractor trailers. It was low skill, but still difficult. It was just emotionally straining to um, have to deal with some of the folks I had to deal with in the warehouse settings. But college was somehow super easy the second I got there, especially at Chaffey College. Because the second I got there, I'll never forget the counselor who I first talked to. He said, "Oh, so you're a little skeptical about college. We're just going to throw you like 3 softball classes and help you with your financial aid application right here and right now. Like, we're going to walk you through everything step by step. And at the end of the semester, not in the middle of it, do all your work throughout the semester. At the end of the semester, we're going to see if you still like college or not." So I remember I took like a cultural anthropology class. I took an introduction to philosophy class, and then one other one. I think it was like art history or something like that. These were all considered to be softball
So would you
classes.
say that counselor was a good first step?
It was a good first step. Yeah, I mean, it's several things, right? It's like the TEDx talk. It's Hazel talking to me, like telling me to do college in the first place. Me reluctantly trying it out, but this guy seeing I was on the fence, this counselor at Chaffey College, and motivating me by just throwing me some wins, some easy quote unquote classes. These 3 classes were
Does everyone meet with a counselor when they go to community college? Or
I don't know. I still don't know exactly
it
what
seems like a huge advantage, the fact that your first contact with someone that can help you.
Yeah, I remember I went like straight to like a help desk and they were like, "Okay, it seems like you're not even like you're not even asking questions that are like specific or relevant." They didn't say that, but I think they could tell I was just not big on the college train. I didn't know what financial aid was or the FAFSA acronym. Like they should have just been speaking a different language. So they quickly directed me over to this guy who seemed to be like, I don't know, the only counselor in the room at the time, but I'm glad it was him because when I took those three classes, I enjoyed the cultural anthropology class enough to get through it, and it was a pretty easy class in terms of the workload that you had to demonstrate as a student. But the readings were kind of difficult, kind of challenging, but I remember finding them intriguing. Art history, same sort of thing, not like a necessarily massive workload, but the writing process that you would have to do while you were in that art history class was very expressive. So I felt like because it was a very subjective way of uh, uh, of performing in the class, like the academic performance was sort of hyper subjective to how one individual relates to certain periods in art history. Again, it was sort of a softball class, but it was the philosophy class that completely changed like my feelings about college. And the reason why is because of the professor. The professor was a great guy. I ended up taking all of his classes at Chaffey College. You see, he was primarily an expert on religion and ethics, and specifically talking about comparing different religions from across the world and sort of evaluating how whether they're able to get along with other religions or not peacefully. That was basically his main area of study, and a lot of those sentiments and debates, he interjected those sentiments in every single class that he taught, whether it was introduction to philosophy, an introduction to critical thinking and logic, an introduction to ethics or religion or philosophy of mind, or just any of these other topics. Um, this professor was pivotal in getting me to suddenly start to love schooling, starting to love college, um, because it seemed like what that class did, what I felt like it was doing at the time, it was giving me space to be able to have like tools and language and problem solving skills to be able to solve some of the very problems that I was going through. I remember I was going through like this depression because I lost my sister. I was going through debates about religion, and now all of a sudden I was a father and I was dealing with class struggle. I grew up a person of color in a very racially isolated in a majority white school, and so I was dealing with my idea of adulthood as a racial minority and racial identity. There was just so many different problems that I was wrestling with at this pivotal point of being 17, 18 years old. And it felt like it was all happening at once. I needed some sort of order. I needed some sort of um, sense throughout this whole, internal conflict. What college allowed me to do was when I found that philosophy class and these pivotal people, they gave me problem solving skills. They gave me the vocabulary, the language to be able to identify these problems as problems, and the the structured thinking to be able to think through these problems, to sort of solve them. Either, maybe some of them aren't completely solved, but to wrestle with them, right? To like work with them. And I think that was pivotal in getting me to start learning how to love learning. I still had some struggles. There were struggles like my fear of math. I was completely math avert. Um, but I urge all the young folks out there to give college a try and try out all sorts of different subjects, because even if you're math averse and you still have to take math classes for your general education, it's the case that I was willing to tough it out and white knuckle it through those math classes because I found a passion that I cared about so much, and that was philosophy. I knew if I had to keep continuing in philosophy and eventually transfer to get a bachelor's in philosophy, I had to tough it out through all the other classes that I didn't like. So you know, there's veins out there, there's paths out there, there's passions out there that are ready for you to find them. But if you don't give it a try to begin with, you're never going to find them, right? I just got really, really, really lucky that I found it my first semester. I
How
did.
did you end up passing your math classes if you didn't enjoy them?
The main thing is all of these community colleges, they offer a ton of academic tutoring and resources. I mean, every California community college I can think of offers some sort of academic support. So when my math teachers would say, hey, for all of you that feel like you need a refresher on everything we just learned throughout this 4.5 hour class, um, just stay for longer because there's academic tutoring available right after class. And I would do that. And by the way, I was doing all this on very little sleep because again, I worked at nighttime, and I was doing all this with while also struggling with childcare. A lot of my classes were online because I would have to take care of my very young daughter while while my partner Hazel was going to a completely different college, and because she was going to a 4 year university, she was going to Cal State LA, and she had to deal with a long drive, a long commute, and her programs were basically her excuse me, her courses were basically a lot harder than mine because they were, even though it was general education, it was general education at a 4 year university rather than a community college. So I feel like there was a lot of it that was not as streamlined towards just hitting certain academic standards. There was a lot of it that was more about getting folks ready for the upper division level versus when you're at the community college level. I feel like while I still received a high quality education, there was just a lot that felt somehow easier. It felt like I had more support. I wasn't in a bunch of big classes. I remember when I took my first um, 4 year university class at UCLA, which is the school I transferred to. Um, my first class at
Well,
two,
usually I can just say I transferred to UCLA and not like make it a big deal. That's a huge deal.
I did. I actually didn't. I knew so little about school that I didn't know it was a big deal when I transferred.
That was my dream school. I didn't even apply because I knew I had no chance.
I I
Still root for the sports team, like I'm an alumni, but
I applied to nothing but Cal States and UCs because I heard they were cheaper schools, and I had like the fee waiver for the transfer application, and I remember I applied to 3 Cal States and 4 UCs, and I just did all 7 of these schools just because I could for free. And I thought to myself, well, UC Riverside is the closest to live right now, but we're about to move to Los Angeles. So if I go to Los Angeles, I should really go to UCLA. And so that's why I picked UCLA. Once I told my professor that at the community college level and other various friend groups that I had at the community college after being involved in their philosophy club and stuff, people were like cheering me on. They were like, oh my God, you're going to like a tier 1 school. This is like the #1 public university. And I was taken aback because I was like, well, I didn't even realize this was a good school.
so I'm assuming you must have had straight A's at Chafee to even
When I was at
enter
Chafee,
UCLA, or how does
when I was at Chafee, I got a B in one class and one class alone, and that was my math classes. For all my math classes, I had to do remedial math classes to like get myself up to the college level, and then finally, when I got up to the college level math, again, I would still keep getting Bs. So I always sort of struggled with it, and I think it had a lot more to do with anxiety over doing math than necessarily my ability to do it. But my anxiety was comforted by all the academic intervention that I would seek out. But all the rest of the classes I took, including pretty difficult ones, like I remember I took um, what was it, a logic class in philosophy, and while everybody thinks that they know logic and they can think logically, um, take a logic class in philosophy. It's a lot of, if A, then B, A, therefore B. But eventually you get to like 50 lined problems where you have these sort of complex formulations. It was a lot like math, but without numbers, if that makes sense. That was a difficult class to do, but I still got an A in that one. So it was remarkable. Yeah, I did end up getting straight A's, and it felt easy. again, it felt easier, I think, than um, Hazel trying to get straight A's over at a 4-year university. Um, but yeah, I just, sent out an application. I went to UCLA, didn't know it was a good school. I just knew I wanted to study philosophy. And immediately, once I got there, I, people would start asking me what I wanted to do with my bachelor's in philosophy. And I was very taken aback by that because people were like, well, what are you going to do with a degree in philosophy? But I quickly found out that most of the philosophy majors at UCLA were all just seeking to go to UCLA's law school eventually. In fact, when you're an upper grad philosophy major at UCLA, you can end up taking a lot of shared classes with law students. Um, so I figured I'd become a lawyer and I'd just go down that route. But wonderfully, I had a professor who, for a class that I had to take as like an elective, she taught an education studies class, which is about community schooling. And this professor was a philosophy undergrad, but for graduate school went into education studies because she found education studies to be a more effective area for her to influence the next generation of young folk. And she got me a research apprenticeship position where I was just, I was enrolled in a class of one where I was her only student for over a year, over an academic year. And I was a researcher. I was actually the first undergraduate researcher at the UCLA Center for Community Schooling. And again, I had a pivotal life change. I became super passionate about something, which was community schooling. And from there, eventually, that led me to get a master's degree in community engaged education here at Claremont Graduate University right after I graduated from UCLA with my bachelor's. And
So let's say you graduated in May or June, and then you started back up in master's like September, so right away.
yeah, in like August, yeah. So I just kept going and I knocked out that master's degree in a year. And after that master's degree, I was like, you know what, might as well just keep going and get a terminal degree and get a PhD. And so I continued at Claremont Graduate University here.
So you
Or
never took any breaks. You just went for straight bachelor's to master's, one summer off, start right away.
yeah, that's exactly right. And summers off is gracious because during all of that time, I was still washing tractor trailers throughout my whole undergraduate education. Uh, until eventually I finally became where I'm at now, which is a community school coordinator. It was a natural next step um, because of my experience in researching community schools. So that's sort of it. That's sort of my learning journey. I've had nothing but pivotal people, pivotal figures who have changed my trajectory, right? I mean, I really need to circle back on this great professor who ran the UCLA Center for Community Schooling. I was literally just an ordinary student within that class. At UCLA, everybody gets like A plus plus pluses, to be frank with you. It's actually it feels like a competitive undergraduate environment. It feels like if you're not a high level research minded individual, like you know, people kind of don't like that. People expect everybody else to be extremely
Like
research
the
oriented.
students, professors, or like,
Students, like between students, everybody needs to be a top tier student because that's how they identify at while being at that school. They have this self identity that they're at a tier one school, so they want to hang out with other tier one students.
yeah, excuse all the kids who had straight A's in middle school and high school, and then you showed up who didn't have straight A's in high school.
That,
Yeah, conflict.
yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So I didn't have as many friends at UCLA, but I wasn't there to make friends. I was there as a dad who is just trying to, you know, figure this thing out. And God, you know, the time of recording this podcast, I'm still figuring things out, to be frank with you. But all I know now, as I look back, is everything about my experience in higher education was completely worth it. Um, Hazel was right. My partner Hazel was right. College was a good way to not go down a path where I'm listless and I'm not doing things like trying to get a better job than what I had then. It's an opportunity to think about how to contribute to society for the greater good. And it's a place where you can really find community. I found that I find that every single time I talk to somebody who studied any kind of philosophy of any kind, I instantly get along with them because we speak a common language. It's almost like if there's any car guys out there, and the way that you find other car guys, uh, you instantly can lean into that as a community, as a point of commonality. And I don't know, like all that was just super significant for me. Um, just a lot of people who they see something in you that you don't see in yourself. You know,
So would you say it's relationships you've had with different staff members at college that kind of helped you be successful? And without those, you probably wouldn't have made it.
that's absolutely the case. Because throughout my whole college going experience, I had self doubt over and over and over again. My self doubt was plaguing me. Every direction I turned. When I became a researcher at the UCLA Center for Community Schooling, and I was expected to publish a paper on community schooling. When I entered my master's program and I needed to do my master's thesis, my capstone, um, there were so many moments where I was just completely overwhelmed with self-doubt, where I felt like I was an outsider. There was all these brilliant people around me, and then I wasn't brilliant, but I was somehow also in their same program. Just a lot of imposter syndrome going on. Every single time I felt like just, hitting the X button and dropping out of there. There was extremely influential senior level people who were holding my hand throughout those self-doubt moments, whether it's an academic advisor, whether it was a professor, school counselors, that initial high school teacher. There was just people who were willing to give me a break and let me know that I could do these things. It just was going to take a lot of work. And boy, oh boy, all of it did end up taking a lot of work. There goes those lights again.
So what would you say to a kid who's in high school who's struggling financially and sees his family struggling? Like, I don't have time for college. I got to go work now and help support my family, help my mom make the rent. Like, what do you say to that kid who doesn't see college as an option because things are hard now and needs to get paid?
That's a good question. So I've always been struggling by juggling three things. That was trying to do school while not knowing exactly what I wanted to do with school. I've been struggling with work. I had very inconsistent work. Whenever it would rain, I wouldn't wash those tractor trailers. And I didn't have any health insurance or anything like that. Only my
Good
partner.
thing it never rains in Southern California.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. God, I went through some pretty crazy rainy seasons. Whole months it would rain. I remember there was this one February. I think it must have been 2021 or so. It killed me financially. Um, but God, it's even during those moments when you're struggling with, balancing a job, balancing school, and then also balancing fatherhood, which I also had to do. To be frank with you, it took me 5 years um, to get my bachelor's degree, not 4 years. And during those 5 years, I was the primary childcare person between my partner and I. So I really felt like I was juggling a lot all of the time. Um, the thing I would say to that young folk who is struggling financially and feels like they don't have time to go to college is that if you're comparing yourself to a bunch of upper middle class kids who feel like they have it easy when they go to college, who get to dorm at their college, who get to, you know, not really have to worry about the finances of college, and they even know what college is and what it's going to be like because their folks went to college. As a first gen college student myself, who struggled with all those uh, deficit based concepts, I would just know that if you keep, I would just like to let you know that if you keep comparing yourself to those folks, um, you're going to keep feeling like you can't do it. If you start comparing yourself, though, to the folks who have done this exact same journey before you, all of a sudden it feels possible. You see, as I was in college, I quickly found out that there were some people who had it a lot worse than I did. I mean, there were some folks who were um, were foster youth and basically had absolutely no support uh, through their college going journey. There were some folks who they were struggling with being able to enroll in any particular college for more than a semester at a time because they were service members. They were enrolled in the military, so they were constantly being shifted across the country, stationed here to station there, and it was just very difficult for them to be able to balance military life and higher education. There was all sorts of different struggles that I could see with other people. But even in spite of those struggles, those people were able to get their bachelor's degree. They were able to succeed in college. When I started to shift my mindset to start comparing myself to those folks, everything seemed a lot more doable. So don't compare, if you feel like you're a bit underprivileged, don't compare yourself necessarily to the privileged ones. Compare yourself to those who have been resilient and have overcome their circumstances and ask them how they did it. What I saw as a hugely important thing, as a hugely important skill, was that people who were underprivileged, who eventually became my professors, always mentioned time management as an extremely important skill. That when you set a certain time to do something, um, you got to do it. You know, that was a skill that I don't know. It basically made me who I am today.
I'm still trying to learn that skill, so if you can teach me, I'll be happy to learn.
Yeah, a quick trick for the young folks out there. It's not enough to reserve some time for yourself to do something. You got to actually do it, right? So you can't just sit there and stare at the screen. You got to start, typing up that essay. You got to start reading that book, and you have to start sending those emails if you that's what you're doing. Get the job done, just as you do when you're clocked in. Treat homework like it's clocking in. You got to be productive during that time.
All right, so thank you for sharing your journey. And if I heard your whole journey so far, but if you can synthesize it in one sentence, what made you love learning?
What made me love learning? I'd say, God, that is the question. I think the main thing that made me love learning, that completely um, changed me, was I found community. There is this conversation that I identified, this intellectual conversation about what life is, what love is about, what struggle is about, and what the meaning of life is, what truth is, and how to attain that truth. There's this conversation, this intellectual conversation, a roundtable conversation that has been happening through the written word for thousands of years. And as the more I got to learn about schooling and the more I got to learn about college, and particularly within the field of philosophy, the more I got to realize that it would be silly for me to not be part of that conversation because it is a cool, rich conversation. You want to be involved in those heavy hitting questions. So that's a lot of sentences, but yeah, there's a 1,000-year-old conversation out there. Why would you not want to be part of it?
Yeah, well, thank you, Mario, for sharing your journey, and hopefully, people benefit from hearing your story.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. And I hope we can flip the script here. I don't think we need to rearrange our chairs or anything for me to do this, but this is Keith, everybody. This is Keith Langdon. He is a PhD student as well here at Claremont Graduate University in the exact same program that I'm in, urban leadership. And he also, was at one point a student who didn't exactly feel passionate about school, but is now here getting a terminal degree. And we want to hear about your story, Keith.
Yeah, well, my name is Keith. Now I am in a PhD program, which is kind of hilarious if you look at my academic journey. Although me and Mario have a lot of similarities in how we got here, our stories are pretty different. So I pretty much grew up in a cookie cutter household, middle class, first generation middle class. Things pretty easy growing up. I didn't have to worry about financial struggles. Everything was provided for me. I worked in high school, left in 12th grade, but not because I had to, just because I wanted to. Wanted some extra spending money. I didn't pay any rent. I didn't even have to pay gas. My parents provided everything for me. So I had a pretty easy life. So by all means and measures, I should have made it. I went to a private Christian school from preschool to 10th grade. And then 11th and 12th grade, when I begged my parents, they finally let me go to public school, although it was 30 minutes away from my house. I didn't get to go to school with my friends in the neighborhood. So I had to go to school 30 minutes away, but I still enjoyed my time. So I say my journey, I was about an average student, graduated high school with a 2.8. And I would honestly say I kind of worked hard for that 2.8. I did fail math in 8th grade. Ninth grade, I was failing the whole year, but I cheated off the TJ on the final. I went from a D to a C. Thank you, TJ. Sophomore year, I cheated off with Jonathan in the whole class, passed geometry. Thank you, Jonathan, out there in the universe. And then 11th grade, I cheated off with Caesar. So thank you, Caesar. So I say that because these are all A through G required classes, which means you have to pass these classes to go to college. So those individuals are the reason I passed that math class. Because math, I completely gave up starting in 8th grade. 8th grade was the very first time I ever failed a class, and failing math just made me give up at math and think that I couldn't do it. Even when I made it to college, I still struggled in math. At the past 2 semesters of math, Math 109 and Math 110, and it took me about 6 semesters to pass those 2 semesters of math classes. What I would do is I would take the class for like 6 weeks. I failed the first test and then I would drop it. So I have like a WF on my transcript. It doesn't hurt my GPA, but math is something I always struggle with. And it was always really a confidence issue. I believed I couldn't do it. So when I got to class, I didn't even try. I didn't go tutoring, didn't go to office hours. I just completely gave up. So any advice I could have anyone who's out there struggling, just try at least. If you know you struggle with something, talk to your teacher, talk to professor. Hey, this is my name. I'm not good at this in the past, but I have a growth mindset now, so I'm gonna try a little bit harder. So just communicate with your teachers and professors. That's one advice I give people because I didn't. I kept to myself. If I was struggling, nobody would know it. I wanted help, but I was not going to get it. It would have to land at my lap. So I noticed some people out there who want the help too and waiting for it to land in the lap. Just so you know, it's not going to land in your lap. You do have to go get it. But starting with my journey, started in preschool. School was fun. I remember I had this teacher elementary school. I had her 2 years, 3rd grade and 5th grade. This Black woman, she really nurtured me, took care of me at the private school I went to. Went to school in Fontana, Rialto, and Redlands. I'm from the Inland Empire, born in San Bernardino, grew up in Rialto. So the IE is a huge part of my story. Although I did hate this place when I was younger. One of the reasons I went to college all the way in Virginia, even though it's not really where I wanted to go. I ended up at a HBCU called Hampton University in 11th grade. My parents took me on a college tour of different HBCUs to see all the different schools in the South and the East Coast. So because of my being in the middle class, I was able to see what options I had, and that made a college a reality. So in high school, I also forgot to mention I failed chemistry in 11th grade. So I ended up passing that in 12th grade. So even though I did fail a few classes, I did realize there were some classes I was good at. I was good at any class that involved writing. I always got an A or B in English or history or any class that where numbers were not involved. So any non-math or chemistry classes, I usually did well, but not A plus, bro. Like I was a B. I would say I mastered the B minus because my goal in school was not to get in trouble at home. I had very strict parents. My goal wasn't to do well; it was just to not get in trouble. That was my whole childhood. I don't want to get in trouble. I had very strict parents. My dad, he worked in law enforcement. My mom, she had a middle class job, worked in LA. Used to do that 2.5 hour commute from LA to the IE every day, leaving at 5 in the morning, getting home at 7:30 at night. Ate a lot of Costco chicken growing up and whatever my neighbors cooked for me for dinner. So being in the middle class gave me a lot of advantages because I'm supposed to be here. But at the same time, there were people I grew up with who didn't make it this far. So they didn't take advantage of the privilege because I definitely consider myself a very privileged person. I was able to go to my parents paid for a math tutor for me, even though I didn't really pay attention or even try. They paid for SAT tutoring on me for Saturdays. Took the SAT 4 times, finally got a decent score. They paid for all kind of programs, but in order for me to tell you how I got here, I really got to start with my parents' story. Because even though they both grew up poor, there was one thing that separated them compared to other family members, and there was this thing called a bachelor's degree. So my mom, she was part of this program called Upward Bound, where she essentially went to college for free. Even in high school, they would take her to college campus to UC Berkeley. She's from the Bay Area. They would give her a mentor. So she was like set up through this program to go to college. And she got into UC Berkeley, but she didn't go because that's where she lived. She didn't want to live close to home. And to this day, she's always felt some type of way that she got into one of the best universities in the world and didn't go. But she ended up getting her bachelor's degree from San Jose State. And then my dad, his story is a little different. His dad was in the military. His brother served in Vietnam. So when my dad graduated high school, say graduated high school on Thursday, his dad kicked him out of high school, kicked him out the house on Friday. So he pretty much was what's the old saying? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, some people don't have a boot, but that's what he had to do. So he got a job. He went to community college for about 10 years because it's kind of hard to graduate when you have to work full time. So about 10 years at Valley College in San Bernardino, he was able to transfer to Cal State San Bernardino, got his bachelor's degree, and then he found him a good high paying union job working for the state of California in law enforcement. And he was able to use that to retire at the age of 50. So cool thing about state working for the state, you only got to work 20 years and you get a full pension. They give you your whole paycheck, even though you're not working. It's pretty remarkable. I don't think they do that as much nowadays. So yeah, my dad retired when I was about 10 years old. He was able to go to me and my sister, all of our basketball games. He became essentially a stay-at-home dad, and he was on me 24/7. Every report card, going to up to the school. Like I didn't have an option to fail my classes because he was on me. And I probably would have if I didn't have such supportive parents. But seeing how a bachelor's degree completely transformed their life, I knew college was something I had to do, not necessarily something I wanted to do. For my household, going to college was like going to seventh grade. That's just what you do. That's what you have to do. It wasn't an option. And even though I was always an average student, my sister had straight A's since she was 4 years old. And I was always jealous of her growing up because I felt like my parents were very happy about her, satisfied. And why can't you be like your sister? She has straight A's. She was a star basketball player. I never made it above JV. I was pretty lazy. And she every report card, she would get $100 for getting straight A's. And that was the deal in my house. If you get straight A's, we give you $100. I never got that $100. So I feel some type of way about that growing up. I felt like I was never as smart as her, but at the same time, my dad always told me, "You're the smartest person in this house." I never quite understood that. I'm like, don't you see all these classes I'm failing? Like, I'm not that smart. Like, just need to apply yourself. But one thing I noticed, my dad always had the History Channel on in the background. And then since I kept getting bad grades, I would always lose my TV every other year. So I might lose it for a semester, I might lose it for a year. So pretty much most of my childhood didn't have a TV in my room, and then my dad would never let me have video games. So I was the only kid in the 90s, no PlayStation, no Nintendo, and no Xbox. So I literally missed out on the whole video game trend. I didn't buy an Xbox until I was 28. That was only because I was a teacher and one of my students was always trying to get Mr. Langdon, you should play video games with us online. I'm like, I'm an adult. I'm not playing no video games. But I was actually playing video games last night at age 34. I've been playing video games for the past 6 years now. Yeah, it's pretty fun. Like these video games things are pretty nice. Yeah.
I've still never played video games.
Yeah, I'm pretty much only play one game, just play basketball, pick the Lakers, and anytime they lose, I go play the Lakers and we win it. It gives me a lot of satisfaction. So anyway, going back to my story, I would say I had two teachers who looked out for me. I had these teachers for 2 years. The one was elementary school. I had her for third and fifth grade, Miss Houston. She actually works in my district now. Shout out to Miss Houston. And then in high school, I had another Black woman. I had a class called AVID. So AVID is a class that pretty much prepares you for college. That's the whole goal. You do college applications. I did more writing in my AVID class. I did in my English class. We went on college field trips. I went on visit every Cal State you see in the state of California. We applied for scholarships and financial aid in class. Like this is a whole elective class.
Yeah.
So it was my avid teacher, Miss Bailey. I had her 11th and 12th grade. She was another person who just looked out for me, not just as a student, but as a person. She's the only person from school I still keep in contact to this day, even though I graduated high school in 2008. So it's always a cool thing to send her an update like, hey, I'm at this college now, or I have this job, or I'm in a PhD program. Kidding me, the kid who filled all those classes. So I was also say the relationships I had with teachers looking out after me. And then going to college, like I said, my dream college was UCLA, but when you have a 2.8 GPA, you know you probably shouldn't not even apply to UCLA. So the reason I love UCLA so much, I was a huge Kareem Abdul-Jabbar fan. In my opinion, he's the greatest basketball player of all time. Sorry, LeBron. Sorry, MJ. I got Kobe second. I'm a big Laker fan, by the way. And then Magic third. And then we could put everybody else on the list. But I don't know. I wanted to be like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He went to UCLA. I wanted to go to UCLA. That was my dream school. So I knew I didn't have UCLA grades, so I just support UCLA in sports. Right now, I'm rooting for the women's team to go all the way. They have a pretty good basketball team this year. So I wanted to go to North Carolina A&T. It was a HBCU that I visited. So for my whole 12th grade year, I told everybody that knew me, I am moving to North Carolina to go to college. Well, unfortunately, at North Carolina A&T, I did not get accepted. One of those things about having a 2.8 GPA, you don't get into every school you apply to. So I just assumed I would get in. So when I got that denial letter, I was devastated. I'm like, I was already mentally prepared to leave the IE, go live in North Carolina. So I did apply to 10 schools, not because I had a fee waiver. My parents actually just paid the application fee. So one of the advantages of being middle class is you have a lot more resources. So Mario and his story is more for students who might have struggled, who might not have had perfect middle class, easy lifehood. And my student story is for the students who you're in the middle class. Your parents have created the resources for you. So even though our stories are different, I believe between me and him, we can reach every kid who needs to hear this. So anyway, my parents paid for all these fee waivers. I mean, sorry, for all these application fees. I applied to 10 schools all over the country because I knew my 2.8, I kind of had to reach out far. So I got into Cal State San Bernardino, got into Sacramento State. I got into zero UCs, by the way, which was kind of obvious. So most of the schools I got into were out of state. So when I didn't get that acceptance letter, I did look at all the schools I got into. I got into Hampton, which was in Virginia. So I looked at the map and I saw that Virginia bordered North Carolina. So the only reason I went to school at Hampton is because it was next to North Carolina. So I've been telling people for 12 months I'm moving to North Carolina. So I felt like I had to leave. I had to be a man of my word. I don't want to be seen as a liar. That's something that was really big in my household. If you say something, you better do it on your word. That's all you come into this world with is your name and your word. So you got honored. So I felt like I had no choice but to leave. And then also had really strict parents. So I was trying to get away. I wanted some freedom. So I ended up at Hampton University. I absolutely hated it my first year. Even though something happened for the very first time in my life, I made the honor roll. I think I had like a 3.3 or something. I had never had higher than a 3.0 in my whole life. My parents were so happy, like, oh my goodness, you're on the dean's list. They were so excited. And then I said, like, yeah, I think I'm gonna drop out and go to a different college. And they were not happy about that. So without them knowing, I did apply to Sacramento State. I had a dorm assignment. I was filling out the financial aid, and then I was gonna go there. But then my parents find out and they were really upset. So my parents, they had a lot of control over me because they were paying for my college. And my parents actually wrote a check to Hampton University every semester paying for my tuition. So one cool things about having parents with middle class jobs is they can pay for things like college. So and they had been saving ever since I was born. I remember being 4 or 5 years old, and they showed me this check and like this is part of your college tuition. And they were just saving every month, every month. But even when I got to college, they still didn't have enough because it was a lot more expensive than it was in 1994. So I felt like I had to stay at Hampton. They said they weren't paying for my education if I left to go to Sacramento State. Like, how you can get the best grades of your life and leave? So I ended up going back, not because I wanted to, just because I had to. So even though I was in college, I still felt like I was 10 years old, being controlled by my parents. But the one good thing they did, they reached out to my college, which that's very not normal, but at a small HBCU, these have these very tight relationships. Kind of a lot of reminds me of the community college that Mario went to, where people support you. So it was this department that called me when I got back to Hampton. They called me in. They would do checkup on me like once a month my whole sophomore year in college, see how I'm doing, just see how I'm socializing with others. So I don't even know their names. I don't even remember what they look like, but they took care of me my whole sophomore year, helped me transition because going from living at home where everything is given to you to living on your own was frightening. So these individuals that worked at the university, who put their arms around me, took care of me, and helped me transition. And finally, when I got to my junior year, I did ended up loving, or not loving, not yet. I ended up being okay with college. Still didn't like it, going through the motions. My whole goal was just not to disappoint my parents. I wasn't trying to get good grades. But I would say it was junior year is when everything changed.
Mhm.
I was a history major, and not because I grew up loving history. It was just that's what my dad always watched on TV. It was a History Channel or it was Maury. He used to love the phrase, "Who is your daddy?" And then seeing the people act the fool. He watched that for 3 hours straight. On my summer break, since I had no TV, I had to go downstairs, and that's all we watched was Maury and then the History Channel. So I wouldn't say I was watching, it was just on, and I was in the background, just I'm bored. I had no video games. I had no TV. I didn't go to school in my neighborhood. So I only had one friend in the whole city that I lived in. And then I was pretty much sitting at home just watching whenever he watched. So I was absorbing some things in the History Channel, all the World War II documentaries. So when I applied for college, I looked at my transcript. I saw that I never failed a history class and never failed an English class. So at first, I wanted to be a creative writer because I remember in my English class in seventh grade, and my English teacher, Miss Langley, amazing teacher, by the way. I had her 2 years as well. I'm noticing anytime I had a teacher for 2 years, I had a good relationship with them. So maybe that's the thing. You just need to have a teacher for more than 1 year.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did this creative writing assignment, and I made up this story. It was like a spin-off to the movie Bad Boys 2. And I wrote it myself. My favorite rapper at the time was Nelly. I'm dating myself because I know he's terrible now, but at age 12, 13, he was the greatest rapper ever. So I mean, it was made the Bad Boys 2 spinoff that had Nelly in it. It was a great story. It was amazing. And I say all that to say I wanted to keep writing stories. That's what I did for fun. And the whole no video games, no TV. I had to entertain myself. So I would just write stories all the time. So I wanted to be a creative writer, but they didn't have that major at my college. So I just looked at the list. It said history. I was like, I guess I do that. So that's how I ended up being a history major. But it was my junior year is a professor named Professor Watson. The class is about like the history of Africa. And at that time, I knew nothing about nothing. It was one of my first actual major classes because the first 2 years in college, we took these classes you have to take called prereqs. It's like the math, science, English, certain classes that make everyone take. And then like your junior, senior year, you get into your major classes. So this is the first time I'm taking like mostly all history classes. And I'm like, oh man, it's pretty fun. Like getting to take classes I actually like school's not that bad. Imagine you go to school all day and you get to pick your classes. That's what school was like when I got to my junior year and I had really good grades for the first time. But anyway, this Professor Watson class, it was History of Africa, and everything I learned in that class was my first time learning it. So imagine every single day you learn something you've never even heard of. Y'all, I knew nothing. I didn't even know Egypt was in Africa. I thought it was in the upper Mediterranean, whatever that meant, because they never talk about Egypt and Africa in the same sentence. So I'm like, wow, one of the greatest civilizations in the world was in Africa? Are you kidding me?
Mhm.
And just every class is mind being blown, learning something about all these different empires that exist and how one point gold was flooded through the whole world. It was devalued because Africa kingdom and that. It was just imagine every day, just oh man, like I'm learning so much stuff. So that was like the first spark that like made me start to like school was that class. And then that junior year, I was still actually trying to leave Hampton. My goal was to transfer to UC Santa Barbara. That's where my sister went, and I just assumed that I'd get in. So once I applied, I didn't get accepted. When I got that letter, I realized, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm staying at Hampton. So I decided to study abroad. So I remember going to a study abroad office. It was very small. Not a lot of students study abroad at a small HBCU in Virginia. But I remember looking at this booklet, flipping the page, look at all the different countries, and I realized, well, I only speak English, so I'm a little limited. By the way, my sister studied abroad in Argentina. She's 2 years older than me, so that was the only reason I wanted to study abroad because she did, wanted to be like her.
Mhm.
So she played volleyball. I played volleyball for 1 year. I was terrible, hit the ball in the stand. She played basketball. I played basketball. So she was having someone 2 years older than you. They kind of leave you a map, so I was just following it. So anyway, she studied abroad. So okay, that's I guess what that's what I do. So I'm looking at this map and I get to all these, looking at all these countries, China, no, Europe, no, I don't go anywhere there. South America, no, I don't speak Spanish. Then I got to Australia. I was like, oh, wow, this looks interesting. And they were like, ooh, they speak English in Australia. I was like, okay, I think this is it. And then I flipped to the next page and I saw New Zealand. And I'm looking at these pictures like, wow, this is beautiful. And then I saw they speak English too.
Yeah.
So after looking at that booklet, I was like, you know what? I'm going to study abroad in New Zealand. And the good thing is the tuition was paid through my school, so it's exact same.
Oh,
So it didn't have to cost my parents anything extra. So if I had financial aid, it would have just transferred over to studying abroad. So even if you do have financial aid, you can still study abroad. So studying abroad was the greatest experience of my life. Even at age 34, nothing even comes close to topping it. It completely changed the trajectory of my life because once I was in New Zealand, it was kind of similar to being in a history class. Every day I saw something that I'd never seen before. Before I went to New Zealand, I pretty much only ate Mexican food and chicken fingers and French fries. Like I was a pretty basic eater. I had Indian food for the first time. I was eating all these different cultures. I mean, people from all over the world. And then New Zealand is the most beautiful place on planet Earth. The mountains, the ocean, they have glaciers, and just I went hiking for the first time. Like, why would somebody walk around outside? That's the dumbest thing in the world. So I find out about hiking, and now to this day, it's my favorite thing to do. I love hiking. Also with backpacking, which I had never heard of, where you take all your stuff with you and you go out into the wilderness for 3 days. So I didn't really understand the concept. Me and a few of my friends went backpacking in the South Island, So I'm under the depression. Okay, we go to dinner at nighttime to a restaurant. So everyone's goal was to bring food. We all going to share. So all I brought was some banana chips. So it's our first night, we getting in the tent. They're like, okay, everyone takes out these canisters, these packaged foods they're cooking. I'm like, okay, where's the food at? I'm like, oh, did you bring it? Like, yeah, I got these banana chips. I'm like, that's all you have for 3 days? I didn't bring any food because I didn't understand the concept. I just like figured like someone's gonna feed us. Like, so I didn't even understand it. So for 3 days, I ate back banana chips and some nuts, and then they shared their food with me. So I got to see things that my brain didn't even understand. And so New Zealand was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. So I got back from New Zealand. I knew what I wanted to do at that point in my life. My goal was to travel the world. So I just had this experience. I wanted to keep it going. So I went back for my senior year in college. That whole year, I was so focused. My goal was to get up out of here and leave. So it did make that senior year a little boring because I was just so tunnel vision. I like, this is what I want to do. And in my entire life, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I remember at one point in high school, my goal was to maybe get a job in Redlands because it was a nice city. That's when I went to high school at. So I was like, I don't know, maybe be a cop in Redlands. Like, no crime takes place there. It'd be easy. Or maybe, I don't know. I had no plan. So New Zealand gave me a plan in my life, and that plan was to travel. So after I graduated from college, my goal was to teach English in South Korea. I remember I applied like 8 months in advance. I got my FBI background check. I passed this course online to be certified to teach English in Korea. And in Korea, they're paying a lot. I want to say it was around like 2,500 a month or 2,800 a month. And they paid for your housing. I was like, oh man, I'm about to stack up and save some money. So I'm going through this process. I went through this company. I applied for the schools, and I never heard back from anyone. So it was like March, haven't heard back. April, May, and then that summer, my best friend at the time invited me to Wyoming. She was being a server. She's actually a whitewater raft instructor now. So part of me realized I should have went to Wyoming that summer. But anyway, I didn't go to Wyoming because like, okay, I'm moving to South Korea in July. Next thing you know, July comes, and I never even had an interview. That was August. Okay, what's going on? So I finally reached out back out to the recruiter, and I said, "What's going on? Like, I don't. I thought I was moving to South Korea this summer. Like, I never even got an interview. No schools even contacted me." And then she gave me the runaround, and finally kept pressing her. And then she said, "Oh, our schools in South Korea, they prefer teachers with fair skin." I was like, "Oh, like, I wish you just said that up front. Like, you just want some white teachers out here." I'm like, "Dang, I didn't know racism was a thing in South Korea." But
No,
so at that point,
a
I'm
bit
like,
on the nose, right?
yeah, I'm like, this was my whole plan was to go teach English in South Korea, save some money, do that for 2 years, use that money to go travel. So now I'm like, I don't know what to do because I already missed out in Wyoming. So like, you know what? I like school now, so let me apply to grad school. So I applied to grad school that summer. Obviously, I didn't get in because I only graduated college with a 3.0. So even though, because I liked school, I didn't like school until my junior year. So those first 2 years, I was just going through the motions. I was right around like a 3.0 the whole time I was in college, like 3.0, 3.1, 3.2. Took some classes, like those math classes, they felt like messed up my GPA. But anyway, I applied to grad school. I wanted to be a diplomat, work for the State Department, because after New Zealand, I realized I wanted to live overseas. And in the State Department, you get stationed in a country for 3 years, and you go to another country for 3 years. So I was like, oh man, that sounds amazing. You have to travel the world, get paid to do it. So every 3 years, I'd be in a new country. So I was stuck in the State Department. I applied there my senior year in college, but I found out early on I didn't get in. So that's when the whole South Korea became the number one goal, and grad school became the backup. So none of that happened. So now plan A, B, and C are messed up. So I go to plan C, teach for America. Okay, they need teachers all over the country. I can do that. There's not that many black male teachers. Didn't get an interview again. I'm like, okay, now I'm 0 for 4. Didn't get into Korea. Now it's September. People are coming back to school. I'd already graduated.
Yeah.
So now I have to go get a job at Radio Shack, make a minimum wage. I did that for 6 weeks. And then I was like, all right, I'm panicking. I applied for grad school again for the spring semester. Didn't get in. So now I'm 0 for 5. I have no idea what to do at this
Did
point.
having to work at Radio Shack kind of like make you doubt the utility of college? Like you had a college degree and then suddenly you're working minimum wage. Like,
Uh,
did it give you like second doubts
no,
about?
only because my sister is 2 years older than her. Same thing happened to her. As soon as she graduated, she was making minimum wage at a coffee shop. So I
Gotcha.
kind of already seen that path. So even though, yeah, you graduate this bachelor's, it's not instant. You
Yeah.
still, it still takes a second. As I ended up telling my students, as I became a teacher later on, that like going to college is like getting the tools to build a house.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can build a house without a shovel, without concrete, without people to help you, but going to college now you have tools. It's a lot easier to build it. You still got to do the work and build a house,
Yeah.
but college gives you the tools to build it. So that's the way I always explain it.
Yeah, I feel like that's an important point because I was still watching tractor trailers after my bachelor's degree. It took me a minute to become a community school coordinator and be like a, you know, like a school leader, right?
Yeah.
So just wanted to hone in on
And then
that.
one of my best friends in college, it took him about 5 years to get a job that required a bachelor's degree. So the whole 5 years after graduate college, like this was a waste of time. It wasn't worth it. I got all these student loans. I got nothing to show for it. And then finally, 5 years later, he was able to get a job that required a bachelor's degree. But
Yeah,
it's not instant, but
it's not
it's
instant.
more about, do I want to have a good life when I'm 40, when I'm 50, when I'm 60, when I'm 70, when I'm 80? Or do I want to be 60 years old, struggling paycheck to paycheck, waiting for my social security check to hit? I'm thinking about somebody right now. It's a little personal, but I want to get back. But anyway, I'm 0 for 5 right now.
That's right.
And then I'm working at Radio Shack, and I realized this is not how it's supposed to be. I'm either supposed to be in Korea, I'm supposed to be working for the State Department, I'm supposed to be in grad school, I'm supposed to be teach for America.
Mhm.
And then I realized I got to figure out what to do. So one night, got on the internet, and then I had looked up teaching English online in other countries, and then China popped up. I'm like, China, I know absolutely nothing about China. But when I was in New Zealand, they picked all my study abroad classes for me. And one of them was a class about 20th century China. So I learned all about China from the year 1900 to the year 2000. And at the time, I realized, why am I in this class? I don't care anything about China. But little did I know that class was preparing me for something. So anyway, I decided to look up teaching English in China. I got a job within 72 hours. I'm like, wait, I have been trying to get a job my whole senior year. 0 for 5, you really got a job within 72 hours? So I was going to go to the north of China. And then I went back home and decided to keep looking at other places in China. So I found this guy from Virginia. He spoke English and he had a school in southern China that he recruited me to. So that's how I ended up in China for 2 years. So China, that was a huge part of my story as well, because while I was there, I was able to travel all over Southeast Asia, go backpacking in Thailand and Vietnam and Cambodia and the Philippines, got to go visit Hong Kong. So my love of learning led to love travel and a passion of seeing other cultures, visiting other people. And I realized we're all pretty much the same in this world. It's not that much that separates a Chinese person from a black guy born in San Bernardino. We all want what's best for our family. We want more opportunities in life. We want to eat good food, have fun, and be around the people we love. So
And would you say your love of traveling and love of learning aren't even separate because as you're traveling every single day, aren't you learning something new?
yeah, pretty much. That was the thing I experienced in New Zealand, that every day was learning something new or seeing something new or
Yeah.
hearing something new and just having my mind blown every day by seeing things that I couldn't even had a concept of or didn't even understand or never heard of. So
Yeah.
just having my mind blown, because when that's happening, you're learning. So learning doesn't just take place in a classroom.
It's not just reading, folks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes place everywhere. I got some friends who only have high school diplomas and they're smarter than I am. So
Yeah.
learning takes place everywhere. But unfortunately, in the society we live in, uh, you kind of need that education to advance. I remember being in high school, my teacher told me only 6% of people who go to community college transfer in 2 years. So I was always taught community college is bad. That's the boogeyman. Because even my dad was like, don't go to community college. You get there and be stuck for 10 years. So I never even considered community college. So it probably would have been a perfect candidate for it, a below average student. I could have gone there, got my foundation, but I was always pushed against it because I thought it was such a bad thing,
Yeah.
a place people go to get stuck. And there is data to back that up.
Yeah.
People look like me, 2/3 of them who go to community college, they ended up leaving. They don't transfer or graduate with associates. So there is some data to back up, but I would say community college is probably a great foundation for someone who's like, I don't know, but only if you're doing it full time. You got to take it serious. So just take a class here and there. You got to go full fledged into it, because cool thing about community college, they don't really care about your GPA is in high school. So when you go to Ford University, yeah, you might need that 3.0, 3.5, go to UCLA 4.0, but community college, they're going to take you as you are. So I kind of have a new goal in life, and that is to work at a community college. So
Nice.
I feel like that's where I want to be, because I was a teacher, middle school teacher in San Bernardino, a history teacher. I had so much fun doing that. The cool thing about being a teacher is the people in your class, they don't necessarily want to be there. They're there because they legally have to. You have to go to middle school in the United States of America. So I had a lot of fun motivating students and getting them to learn and love and have a passion for history that I have as well. And I feel like in community college, I might find similar students who might be there just because they need a place to go, and I can help them instill that passion that I have.
Yeah, awesome. That's super cool. And yeah, like that, those stats about community college, I want to point that, I want to highlight that. That's super true, even experientially. I mean, when I was there, we would very frequently start a community college classes with like 29 students, and then about halfway through the semester, once you get to your midterms, you would end up with exactly half. You'd end up with like 15 students. And by the time you got to the finals, sometimes there was as little as like 7 students in the class. And it's honestly remarkable. Right now, community colleges are trying to they're going through a bit of an identity crisis where they ask themselves if if you only have like 6 or 7 or 8% of your class um, moving on into being transfer students, is it really the case that they're effective at what they're supposed to be doing? They're sort of questioning that, constantly asking themselves how to address those things. But I hope that at least one of the ways we can address it is by highlighting our stories, right? That if you remain committed and you are essentially willing to go all in to this higher education endeavor, you can do it. But one of the key things that you have to do, as I think we pointed out with both of our stories, is you have to be willing to ask around. You got to ask for help, right? I noticed you said that when it came to your junior year and being able to go through, once you were at that point, you basically were able to go through those 2 math classes throughout those 6 semesters because you were finally able to kind of ask for some sort of help, right? And
I don't think I went to math tutoring until like my senior year in college
there you go. Okay.
because I wanted help. I just wasn't going to get it.
Yeah.
It had to land in my lap, or else I had too much pride to ask somebody for help.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I'm a little fuzzy about is your transition from being a English teacher in China over to being a middle school teacher. How did that transition take place?
So while I was in China, I was teaching English, and at the time, it wasn't because I wanted to be a teacher. I just needed an excuse to travel. I think after my 2 years in China, my goal was to go to Peru, stay there for about 2 years, being an English teacher there, learn Spanish. Being from California, I was always embarrassed that there's a whole language people speak that I can't speak. I just feel like the culture of California, you got to speak Spanish. So my goal was to learn Spanish. I was going to do 2 years in Peru, then maybe 2 years in Middle East. I've always loved the Middle East. It's one of my never been there before, but just reading about it throughout history, it's like the foundation of civilization comes from the Middle East, and I just love just the culture out there, just how close people are with spirituality and just being in the desert. I mean, Jesus wandered in the desert, what, 30, 40 days? He was in the Middle East. I just feel like people in the Middle East are a little closer to God than everyone else. So I've always just had this fascination with the Middle East and living out there and seeing I can find a similar path as people have had historically. But anyway, I was teaching English in China, and then I actually was able to found a program in California at Concordia University to get my master's degree
Mhm.
in international development. I had no idea international development was. I had to Google what it was because I'd never heard of it. But all I knew is that I could teach English in China while getting a degree from University of California and getting a master's, something I've been trying to do for 2 years. So that's how I ended up in China my second year through this graduate programs. I was able to do research in China and get a master's degree,
Right.
even though it's a subject I never heard of. So after a quick Google search, I learned what international development was. So at this point, I had a little experience with teaching English, and I came back home, still with the goal of working at the State Department, because now I have a master's degree. I have some international experience. So back in 2011, I didn't get in. So now it's what, 2015? I have a better candidate. So my goal this whole time from 2008 to 2015, no, 2011 to 2015 was work for the State Department. So while that was my goal and that was something I was very passionate about, it was Thanksgiving. It was about a year after my dad had passed away. My parents' birthdays both on the same day, November 26th, usually run around Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving is always our favorite holiday in the household. Not Christmas or mine's Cinco de Mayo. It's my birthday, by the way. You Cinco de Mayo fan. But anyway, Thanksgiving is like our family favorite holiday. So it's like one of our first Thanksgiving, like without my dad. So
Yeah.
my mom had the idea of taking me and my sister to go volunteer at a soup kitchen. And I'll be honest with you, I did not want to go. Like, I don't want to go volunteer. Like, Thanksgiving's our day to be with our family, and I don't want to be around other people, and I was still in my emotions and feelings, and I didn't want to share Thanksgiving with others. It was always a very intimate thing. So anyway, we're at
Oh,
this
great.
soup kitchen. It was like on the border of San Bernardino and Highland, and I met this older black woman there. So there's a lot of in my story. There's a lot of black women that pop up and take care of me. So anyway, I met this older black woman. She was really nice. We get to talking. Her hometown is where I went to college at in Hampton, Virginia. So you don't meet too many people from Hampton, Virginia, and San Bernardino.
Right.
So we just had a really good conversation. And at the end of it, she was like, "Oh, you should apply to be a substitute teacher in San Bernardino." And in my head, I'm thinking, "Woman, I ain't going to be a U.S. ambassador. I'm not going to be no substitute teacher. You kidding me?" But anyway, that Monday, I got a call from San Bernardino, the school district, was like, "Hey, we heard that you'd like to be a substitute teacher. Can you come in today and apply?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, actually, the funny thing is, I had applied to be a sub there like 3 months ago, but I never heard from anyone because my goal was to come home, graduate with my master's, but it takes a lot longer to write a master's dissertation than I was expecting. So I ended up being home for a year before I graduated with my first master's. But I was under the impression that I was going to write my master's dissertation like a couple of weeks and graduate early, but that didn't happen. So
Right.
make sure you're planning and what you say about study time and make the actual time for it. That's what I underestimated. And I'm still learning it, even though I'm in the PhD program. I'm still learning the whole time management. But anyway, I get a call from the school district. They come and apply. I filled it out in paper on the spot. And then next thing you know, I'm a substitute teacher in San Bernardino. And at the time, I had no idea who this woman was. It
Mhm.
wasn't until I got to my very first school site, they had this picture on the wall that says school board members. And I remember seeing her face. I was like, oh, wait, that's that lady I met. She was the president of the school board. So little did I know I was meeting the president of the school board and she was setting me up as a substitute teacher. So the whole time I subbed for about one semester. Okay, this is just a one-time thing. Okay, I'm gonna do this for a semester. And then I'm gonna go work for the State Department, work my way up to be U.S. ambassador for New Zealand. That was my dream job, and it still is one day. Maybe when I'm 60 or 70, hopefully got a long time on this planet, God willing. But anyway, while I was substitute teaching, I met a teacher. It was a black male at another middle school, and he would just every time I came to his school, he would always try to recruit me to get my credential.
Mhm.
And then it got to the point where he would personally call me, "Oh, I'm about to be out these next 2 days. Can you come cover my class?" So I built a relationship with this guy. And then he had convinced me to go get my credential at UC Riverside. So this was around like April. I want to say the deadline might have been like October, November. So I was like 4 months past the deadline. So anyway, I called UCR. They told me I was past the deadline. And I have this thing where I don't really believe in no. My wife likes to say I don't follow the rules. I do if they're my rules. So I don't really do well with rules. I just kind of like doing my own thing. That's kind of how I ended up traveling over the world. I just make my own path. So no, I'm gonna apply anyway. I don't care if I missed a deadline or not. I'm gonna apply anyway. And then I called them up and say, "Hey, did you get my application?" And I guess they might have been short people, but somehow they let me in. I even applied for a scholarship, got part of it paid for. So I did have to take out a loan for that. So I was fortunately being middle class. My first loan was when I got my when I was in grad school. So I took the loan for both my masters. So now I'm going to UCR. I already have a master's. So I'm getting my master's education, my credential at the same time. It was in 12 months. So I got into UCR. And then when I was at UCR, they tell me you have to be a student teacher for a year. Well, the thing about student teacher, you don't get paid. So you're telling me I'm about to spend 12 months not getting paid? How's that even going to happen? And at the time, I had a girlfriend who ended up becoming my wife. We had an apartment together. So I was like, hey, you're just gonna have to pay the rent for while I'm a student teacher. But the thing happened when I was student teaching, I was able to get an internship, which UCR had a policy of they don't give out internships. So I was able to apply for one. They told me no for 2 months. And then finally, I was able to change their mind and I was able to be a full-time teacher, even though I was still at UCR getting a credential. I got paid starting in February. So instead of student teaching for a whole year, I was able to get a full teacher salary starting like that second semester.
Right.
So it felt like I had free money for 5 months because I wasn't planning on it. So that gave me a huge advantage, a leg up just to have 5 months I was able to work and become a real classroom teacher. Even though that first year was a terrible experience, one of the worst experiences of my life. I hated every moment of it. And I actually was quitting. I had no intention of going back to that school. I had gotten another job at another school, another district. I was going to move there, work there. But then I just started thinking about it, and then my wife pretty much forced me to go back. So you can't just give up that fast. Like, at least try to do it a full year. Like, kids deserve, at least try again. So I ended up trying again, ended up staying at that middle school for 7 years and ended up falling in love with my job. So yeah, I started off hating teaching at middle school. I used to get off the freeway and I would get so sad, like the closer and closer I got, I would just get sadder and sadder and pull up in the parking lot, just like, oh my God, I can't do this today. And at the worst, I started getting sad on Saturday night because I knew the next day was Sunday. I had to go to work, and I would stay up to like 4 or 5 in the morning on Saturday just to prolong Sunday, and just it was a whole day of dread and felt like depression. So I started off like that as a middle school teacher, and then towards the end, I couldn't wait to get to work. Sunday was my favorite day because Monday was the next day. So I went from that pain to that joy. There's a song called Joy and Pain. So I experienced it all as a teacher. I experienced the hate my job, and then I experienced the love of my job. And towards the end of my time at being a middle school teacher, I didn't have to set an alarm because I just woke up internally just excited, and I could not wait to get to work because I had so much fun being a history teacher.
Man, what a full circle story. I mean, the way that came to love learning through history. You found your love of history, eventually teaching history onto the next generation. Yeah, and it's funny that that represents one of the similarities that I feel like we've got in our stories, and that we did end up becoming a bit full circle because I needed to rely on a bunch of community-based resources in order to propel me to my through my academic journey. Now, as a community school coordinator, same sort of thing. Like I provide community resources for students to propel them through their academic journey. So it's funny. I think that for the young folks out there, it's one of those lessons where you might agree with this. You sort of have to trust the process, don't you? I mean, there's certain moments, there's certain things that like you just need to push through sometimes with the faith that it will benefit you overall in the long run. I think of this instance you brought up of being enrolled in a course where you're learning 20th century Chinese history, and you're sitting there thinking, I this is kind of not my passion. Like I'm not super, into Chinese history, but eventually it ended up helping you anyway. So I don't know, but just highlighting that as a poignant lesson. Um, um, let's see what time. I think we're good podcasters. If there's any other questions you have about Keith's journey and how Keith learned how to love learning, or my journey and how I learned how to love learning, uh, just feel free to send them in the comments below or something. And that's it. Dab on.
Adios. Ni hao ma. Zai
Is there can you do a New Zealander accent? That's a tough accent to do.
Good day, mate. I got some sweet chili, mate. Oh, keen ass, mate. That's all I got.
A bad accent.